Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are super excited to be here with you all today to talk about design principles for wow-worthy visuals. As people continue to join, I'd love for you all to just take a quick minute to introduce yourself in the chat functionality of the Zoom. I'd love to know three things about you. So first and foremost, let us know who you are, your name, all of that kind of good stuff, where you're joining from in the beautiful world, as well as what is your role. Myself and Tori will kick things off. And so I will first and foremost introduce myself as you guys on this call introduce yourselves through the chat. My name, as you will see on Zoom, is Amy Simic. I have worked at Lucid now for actually over 4 years, which is wild. I worked in a variety of different roles that really apply themselves to this concept of building wow-worthy visuals. I've worked in customer training. I've worked in our consulting team for our customers, and currently and actively, I'm working in our global sales enablement team. Within each of these roles, I've had to create a variety of different kind of Lucid documents, whether they're internal specific or customer specific, that have to relay a variety of different information. Whether it's creating documents like big room planning for customers that has to convey a lot of information and functionally work in a lot of different ways, but also be visually appealing, to workshops and a variety of different educational materials. So extremely excited to be here and dive in with, of course, Tori, Tori, please introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Hello, everyone. My name is Tori. I'm the manager here at for our learning services team my gosh, it's been a minute since I've introduced myself like this. I'm the manager for the LXD team, and we are situated in the learning services team. So a lot of what my team does is our main goal is to create content that enables our customers to use the product. So this is videos, guides, courses, learning paths, you name it. Most learning design teams will actually have specific roles and own particular parts of a design process. My team is a little unique though, in the sense that we do a little bit of everything. So we all do video design, we're all doing graphic design, UX design, and learning design. While each of these competencies have their own set of rules, there's foundational knowledge that carries across all of them. So all these spaces, some foundational principles that I feel like will be really beneficial for y'all here who are trying to learn how to design more wow-worthy visuals. So this topic I'm particularly passionate about, and I am really excited to get into with you.
Absolutely. Well, now before we dive in and we start talking about all the great things of how to build wow-worthy visuals, we want to cover a couple housekeeping items to make sure that we are all aligned on how today's session is going to run. So first and foremost, as many of you who have hopped on the Zoom call have noticed, we are recording this webinar. You are going to be expecting an email with a link to this recording within about a day or two after this session, and it will be sent to the email that you used to register for this webinar. So remember what email you used, because that's where this recording is going to go. That email, though, is also going to include some additional resources, including a full course on the design that we will give you hands-on experience and practice with around everything that we're going to be covering today. So if you ever in the middle of the webinar think to yourself, wow, this is really great, I'm not fast enough at taking notes, or I want to continue to absorb, but there's so many good things. Do not worry, do not fret. In that email with the recording is that course that's going to give you that hands-on experience and dive in a little bit deeper. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Last but not least, next kind of thing to note, we don't want this webinar to just be Tori and I talking at you guys. We want to hear from you like we already are in the chat, which thank you guys so much for participating, letting us know where you are in the world and who you are. So please feel free to continue to use that chat to share your thoughts, share how you're excited about the different concepts and things that you're learning within this session and how you're excited to apply them to your work. Because what's great about things like this is we're all going to be learning from each other and gaining inspiration from each other in the way that we're building. And you might be saying, well, okay, I'll use the chat for cool thoughts and feelings and how this entire presentation is going, but where do I go ask questions? So to ask questions in the webinar, which we definitely want as we're going through, please use the Q&A functionality. You'll see that kind of either in the bottom or the top of your Zoom application. There's the Q&A button. Please utilize that to drop any of your questions in there. This allows for us to manage those questions so that we can make sure we're answering them in order, we're taking the time to really review them and provide you guys with the information. Something to note is the Lucid team, we got a whole team here with you guys, are going to be on top of answering those questions synchronously as Tori and I go through a variety of different concepts. However, we also are going to be saving time at the end of the webinar to answer some of those questions live if they need to be supported with a live Q&A answer, if that makes sense. So if you don't feel like your question's getting answered right away from the Lucid team in that Q&A functionality, that might be because we're saving it to the end to answer it live to make sure that you get the exact answer that you need for the question that you asked. So last but not least, again, remember to use that Q&A functionality to ask questions so we can keep track of everything. Final thing I want to cover before we get started. Live captions are enabled for this webinar. So you can go ahead and turn those on if you like, just to have those going. I know personally, I love to have them on just to make sure I get the full experience of the webinar and I'm not missing a single thing. Alrighty, whew, we got all of that various housekeeping out of the way. We're ready to dive in. Let's go. Alrighty, so here at Lucid, we really do live and breathe visual collaboration. I'm truly in and out of Lucid documents all day, every day. And without fail, there will always be one meeting that I'm in. And I know Tori feels this too, where I'm in where someone is going to say, please forgive the visuals. I'm not a designer. I think it's pretty common for people to feel a little self-conscious about anything they put in front of their colleagues. I know I do, and I've been at Lucid for 4 years. I've been building in documentation for 4 years, and I still sometimes have that little bit of that flutter in my stomach when I start to share documentation with my team. Additionally, I also recognize we all share and organize information a little differently. Something that makes sense to Tori on Canvas might not make sense to me. So I want to read this quote. Good design is like a refrigerator. When it works, no one notices, but when it doesn't, it sure does stink. So why does good design matter? If done poorly, a sign like this could turn into a terrible game of Scrabble. Or for some, design could cost you truly your degree. And for others, it can be a matter of life and death, like in this example here. We are surrounded by design, from traffic signs to restaurant menus. It is everywhere you can possibly look. It shapes what we understand, what we remember, and how we really engage and experience things. Tori, before I get your thoughts, I'd love to hear from the audience here. What challenges do you all face when it comes to design? Please, again, utilize that chat functionality. Let us know. What are some of the challenges you guys are facing when it comes to designing documents in Lucid or designing in general? Yeah, lots of info that needs to go into a small space. Really good call out. Making my thoughts organized. I deeply, deeply feel that one, Danielle. My own lack of creativity. Leslie, I feel you. Sometimes I feel like I am the most boring person alive. Clutter versus enough info. Really good call out. Just making it look good. Oh, I'm loving all of this. Creating clarity instead of confusion. That's a really big one. I think said individual is going to love this webinar. With that, the flow of logic. Tori, are you seeing any others that you want to call out?
The one that really resonated to me is, I think, the lie that you have to feel creative in order to design something that works really well for your audience. I feel like there are a lot of insecurities when it comes to design. And first of all, I believe everyone has a level of creativity within them, but also I feel like people are a little too harsh on themselves, and it's easy to learn these things. And I think, yeah, we're just a little too hard on ourselves, and you do not need to be a Da Vinci to do these things well. And so that one in particular really resonated with me. But all of them are catching my attention.
Absolutely. I think what's important to remember here, all of these are definitely resonating, but important to remember is even if you don't feel like you're making something logical or it's creative or it's pretty, all of those things, because you're here and you're willing to be at this webinar, because you're already thinking in this way, you are already stepping up into a level of creativity and thought process when it comes to the design of your documentation. You're already thinking, well, I recognize sometimes I'm not the most creative, or maybe I am just brain dumping on this document. And is it the most organized? You're already taking that first step, right? To being empathetic when it comes to other people engaging in your documentation. So I want to move forward. There are so many great things coming in the chat. Please continue to drop, but let's look at some of these challenges we've seen here. Tori, do you want to dig into a couple of these?
Yeah, so these are a couple of things that I see often and that a lot of people have actually communicated to me or come to me and said, hey, how can I improve some of this stuff? So the biggest thing for me that I see is too much information. I'm in and out of documents all the time from other teams, and there's so much context that needs to be shared, but you need to understand that for you to collaborate and work effectively together, I might not need to know all the details of what's going on in this process to create a visual that actually speaks to a customer in the way that they need. A customer might not need to know everything there is to know about our processes. There's just certain things that they're going to care more about. So being really judicious about what it is that you put in front of people, I think is huge. Who is my audience? What do I want to emphasize? I think too often with us being experts and knowing like, we need to communicate all of these things. And I think in general, it is a good rule to over communicate. But when it comes to visuals, you really want to work on being concise. Misuse of color and text. I see this all the time. And I actually think this is where a lot of people start to get overwhelmed. They might feel like they're cruising and going as they're building things, but then they have to add color and they start adding color and other elements. And then they're like, oh, wait, hold on. I messed this up. It's not making sense. I don't like it. And I don't know why I don't like it. So I see that kind of stuff a lot. And a big thing about that with text in particular is you have to worry about accessibility, which also is labeled here below. Competing elements. So if you're trying to communicate something, there's obviously going to be things that you want to emphasize over others. If you have, this really important presentation that you're giving, and the meat of it is in this text, but you have this giant photo of Banff, as a background for this visual, I'm not going to be paying attention to your text. I want to know where this picture was taken. What do we have going on here? So like competing elements, I think is really huge there. Movement is scattered. So oftentimes, and what's really cool about our product is that you can connect synchronously or asynchronously. Something that my team has to think about often is that when we're educating our customers, they are doing it on demand. So we're not there to tell them, this is how you're supposed to interact with the diagram. This is how you're supposed to move through the whiteboard. We have to be very careful about how we situate elements on the canvas so that it's very clear where they're supposed to navigate and how they're supposed to digest the content. Lack of clarity. I think that blends in with movement is scattered, too much text. It's all under that bucket. Already discussed colors aren't accessible. We will talk a little bit about that later. And then just struggle conceptualizing ideas. I actually, this in particular, one of the best practices that I share with my team is if you are trying to draft and refine at the same time, you are going to waste a lot of energy. And so when it comes to conceptualizing ideas, oftentimes you just need to get your ideas from your head to the canvas, and then you can start to look at it and be like, okay, I need to make these things more concise. This is the visual that's going to support this message. And you do it kind of in phases, but too often I feel like people make it harder on themselves because they're trying to draft and refine at the same time. We'll get into that a little bit later, but Amy, you want to tell us what good design looks like?
Absolutely. You guys, I'm continuing to resonate with a lot of the things that are just coming in and the things we are all struggling with. So then, like Tori said, what is good design? Good design at its core focuses on these three different things. Clearly communicating the necessary information that needs to be reviewed And it should be functional, meaning it should just be easy to interact with and get that information from. And last but not least, this is probably where all of our heads are at when it comes to design. It should be delightful. I love that word choice when it comes to design. It should really delight the viewer, both in the experience and how it is being viewed. When we think about good design, many make the mistake of that it has to be all about the color and the font and the images and just all of that kind of good stuff, when really that's just part of the equation. Steve Jobs said, design is not just what it looks like and feels like, design is how it works. These are all important components you'll want to think about when you are creating really captivating visuals. Tori, over
I
to you.
feel you know me, Amy. I talk about this at nauseam. I feel like function is such a big part of what makes a design really effective. So one thing that I teach is there's two components. It's function and flair. I always say to prioritize the function. And I love this quote from Steve Jobs because I really do think about Apple. And if you've ever interacted with any Apple products, the experience is really seamless. It's really beautifully done. And so, and it's because they are prioritizing this function component. The reason why functionality is so important, and I feel like it is sidelined often because it's not necessarily the fun stuff, but I feel like if your diagram, if your whiteboard is not speaking to your audience, it doesn't matter how pretty it is. The minute they start to interact with it, they're going to hit friction, they're going to hit roadblocks, and then they're going to give up. We don't have all day to try to figure out what it is that is going on here, right? We're all very busy and it's a struggle. So you really want to prioritize that function. When I think about, building something new, I use the analogy of building a house. So the function is the blueprint, the framing, the plumbing, the wiring, the things that help it work and operate the way that it should. And then the flair is the decorations, the paint, all the things that make it fancy and beautiful. And so as we get into this, you'll see I've kind of structured things to prioritize that function element, and then we'll jump into flair. So kicking it off with good design is functional. All right. This is one of my favorite acronyms. If you want something that is functional, you need to think about good design as crap. And this is always a shocker when I teach people this, because it's like, wait, you just said that design needs to be good, right? This acronym crap actually, it puts into perspective the principles that are really core to design. So there are a few principles out there that you can learn about, but this is a really good starting point. So essentially, these are the four design principles that we're going to be incorporating today, and I'll be talking through. If you anchor yourself to these, you're going to be just fine. So the first one, contrast. So the key here is contrast creates emphasis and interest, and it's going to guide your eye through the design. The big thing about contrast is, or the thing that you're going to want to aim for, is make the contrast bold. So oftentimes, well, actually, this is a great example of contrast even right here, right? So we made the text bold, so you know that this is the principle, and then I'm giving you bullet points below it, showcasing what it is or what I mean by that. So you're showing a level of hierarchy. And to be honest, I would probably even bump up this text right here to make it even bolder. You really want to establish that hierarchy with sizing and bold fonts or bold letters. So that really helps there. Okay, R is for repetition. So repetition is really huge in learning design. We as people love patterns, and repetition creates that pattern. It creates a type of rhythm in your design. And so it's really important to be able to think about, okay, how do I tie all this together? Oftentimes in design, I think about it like, this feels like a family. This feels like it flows really nicely. So it typically will unify and strengthen the design. What you want to avoid with repetition is too much of this can make the design boring. Don't over-index on this right now. I think like as you're starting with these design principles, really just master the repetition, and then you can figure out how to zhuzh it from there. All right, Alignment. So alignment creates connection and it dictates the element placing. So you'll see here in this example, it's all about lining it up to one distinct line. And you can even see alignment here where we have the boxes aligned at the top right here and to the side. It's just really being intentional with the space that you're using. The thing to avoid with alignment is using more than one type of alignment. So if I were to align this to the right, and it's different from what we have going from the others, you're breaking the repetition, you're lacking consistency here too, and it's going to create a little bit of friction. So you'll want to keep left aligned. Occasionally you can do center alignment. You'll see that on websites often, but as a practice at Lucid, my designers are usually doing left align. And then proximity. Proximity is huge. So this breaks up info. I know a lot of you were voicing, hey, there's a lot of information on this document. How do I make sense of it? How do I communicate to other people that these are the things to prioritize, or that these fit together, these ideas fit? And essentially, proximity chunks up this information so you can see the pairing. It creates these families or these concepts. It's connecting ideas and relatability. That really helps with memory. That really helps someone digest information, a lot of information, with ease. So the things that you want to avoid here, you don't want too many separate elements on a page. And you want to make sure that you're creating relationships with the right content. So this is a really good example of, this might be a main idea, and then this is just some subtext below it, kind of supporting that big idea. And you want to keep, and this is the next big idea. And I'm actually going to show you in a team space that my team built, kind of how these principles are applied within a Lucidchart document or board. So here we made a team space, and you can already see some of these elements here. So proximity, repetition, and alignment are all within this space here. So we have the roster, and it's separated into individual teams. Within the teams, we have the name of the person that is owning a particular part of the process and what their role is. So you see this pattern. So you're seeing the repetition throughout this for every team, right? They're grouped in proximity and they're all aligned to the left. Okay, so it just feels really nice. And then you'll also go for it.
Mind zooming in? Just some of us
Yes.
on the call, yeah. Just like as you're covering some of the stuff, just zooming in on those sections. Oh, for those of us like myself who are blind.
Thanks, Amy. And then contrast here, you'll see that the top, the name is going to be in bold, and the role itself, you'll actually remove that. And so you can also see contrast in the colors. We'll get to this a little bit later, but we really wanted to make the sticky notes here pop out. So we have that against a dark background with the lighter sticky notes to just make it really pop, if you will. When people ask for a design to pop, typically they're wanting more contrast, I've come to find. And then showcasing alignment as a whole, this whole sequence of frames are aligned. They're all aligned at the top, at the bottom, to the sides. So it just feels like a really nice organized space and box. Okay, we go into more details with the digital workbook that we're sending out as additional resources, so you can learn more about these principles and practice in applying them. All right, so layout. Layouts are so important. I said this earlier, typically when you're building, draft all of the stuff that you need to, draft all of your ideas, put it on the canvas first, and then you'll want to start organizing those ideas, organizing them, pairing them, and then you'll typically put them in a layout format. One thing to remember here, well, I'll say this, layout, I think of it as UI. You know, if you're ever interacting on a website, the UI of it is so important. And I found this quote, and it resonates the same way as I feel about layouts. So UI is like a joke. If you have to explain it, it's not that good. So this really resonated with me. And so that's why it's really important that you actually start applying these principles even at the layout stage. And so we'll go through how you can see where we're applying those principles with these different formats here. But One best practice or one thing to call out or to be aware of when you are designing your boards and your diagrams is, for the most part, we read left to right, and we're used to the scrolling up and down motion that we're used to when we're searching, the internet. And so those actions are really common to individuals, right? And so that's I take account those aspects when I'm putting together a layout. And these are the three that I use the most often. So no secret, this is a type of presentation, and this is the format I chose today. This one works really well for presentations, swim lanes. So normally I'm using this if I'm having to present to a group of stakeholders or for, wonderful groups such as yourself, customers, anytime that there's maybe less interaction, but a lot of visuals to be able to communicate what I need to. All right, the second sample, this can also be used in presentations. I use it more for building workshops, I'd say. There's a little bit more flexibility with this style, and there's something about this format that psychologically you start at the surface or maybe even like what the end goal is, right? And then you work backwards. And so you get down layers going deeper and deeper until you get to, the really good stuff. And so this for me just puts me in a mindset when I have to get more depth. And I actually see us use this a lot in workshops. I actually have a sample of a strategic workshop. So you can see some of this already. You're seeing proximity, right? I know that this is a group, this is a family, this is a family, this is a family. We also added numbers here so you weren't confused in which order you should be engaging with all of these. Though I will say how the white space is used and the proximity, it makes it pretty easy for me to know, okay, I'm supposed to engage with this whole thing and I'm going from top to bottom first, and then I'll switch over to 2, 3, whatnot. Everything's aligned. There's repetition through the design as a whole as well. So it's getting me in that rhythm of like, okay, I'm in part 2 now, and then we're going to go deeper with all of this information there. Okay. And then this final one, I call it a workbook style. The reason why I call it that is because in learning design, there's oftentimes that we're building activities, and it's really important that we have a side panel that actually communicates instructions, directions. Again, we're not there with customers when they're interacting with our learning experiences. So we want to make sure that we designate the space for where we're giving instructions and communicating what we need on the left. And then we are having the workspace available on the right. And so, and this format can come up in a lot of different ways, but in particular, I think about business process mapping, for example, takes on this type of format, kind of subtly, where you're wanting to put the legend to give you indicators of what each of these shapes mean through color. You're wanting to put that right here because that's an important piece of visual communication that someone needs to understand first before they actually get into the space in the middle. So this might be the focal point, but again, we read left to right. So we want to put those important, like, here's the context, or this is what you need to understand in order to make sense of this. So I really think about that for process mapping in particular. Or this is also a really good format if you are wanting feedback from your team. So I might have a diagram and I'm talking with my team like, hey, we need to achieve these 5 things. I can make a panel to the side with a frame and list out those things that I'm looking for. And so they know, okay, these are the things that Tori needs feedback on. So let's get in and let's actually start adding some of that there. Okay. So throughout these slides, you'll see a couple of features that I have listed here. These are all features that we go into depth in the design course that will be sent to you after this webinar. So do not panic. I'm not demoing any of these, but I am talking about how I think about these and how I work with them often. So layouts, if you want to take the guesswork out of it, we have great templates, and visual activities are actually really savvy. So I love those. The color's already implemented, it looks beautiful, ready to go. You might have to make some adjustments here and there to fit the needs of your team, but if you are ever stressed or in a bind, those templates are fabulous. Frames, containers, and dynamic tables. So I'll start with dynamic tables. For those of you that really struggle with wrapping their minds around what it is that they want to communicate or what's most important, organizing those ideas or drafting them in a dynamic table actually sometimes really helps me. It doesn't work for everything, keep in mind, but recently those have really saved me. I just need to wrap my mind around how I look at all these through the different phases. And so dynamic tables has come in clutch for me. Um, but I teach this all the time. Use frames if you're trying to section off different areas. So for example, you might have a big frame talking about layout, right? But within that, you might have separate pieces of content that relate to layout. So you'll want to put frames around those maybe. You maybe want to designate like this is one area in particular, this is another one. So instead of using shapes, which I see a lot of people do, use a frame and just remove the title from it. The reason why I suggest that is because frames are really nice. If you move them, it will take the content with them. So this is a prime example right here. If I move it, it's taking all the content with it. If you are adjusting and having to, refine your visuals as you go, that just makes life so much easier. If you're having to work with shapes, it becomes a big deal. So I normally suggest if you're wanting to create a diagram or a whiteboard that has a little bit more dimension and you want to use shapes in particular to do that, use frames and just delete the frame title at the top.
Hey, Tori, real quick, do you mind zooming into the tips you're talking about? Because again, sweet blind me and some other individuals want to read what you're saying. So yeah, if you could just zoom in a little bit to that features and tips section, that would be amazing.
Accessibility, everyone. It's important. Thank you for calling me
And we
out.
all got to remind ourselves about it. You know what I mean?
I know.
Here we are. It's all good. It's all good.
Just a plug for breakout boards and Lucidchart pages. So when you are organizing this content, and this goes back to making things more simple or providing more clarity, you might not need to have all the information on the front page. So breakout boards and Lucidchart pages are going to be your best friend in that case. So for us, we have a ton of different processes related to building a course. So we have processes within processes, essentially. Trying to figure out how to visualize that for the team is tricky, but we actually will leverage pages to be able to go a level deeper and showcase, the sub process of how to create a video for a course. And so it's all within one document. It's just on different pages. So we're kind of chunking up the information so it doesn't hit you all at once. And people can tap into that if they want to or not. Okay, some tips here. And we go into quick duplicate in the course. So you'll have to go check it there if you want to learn about that. So some core tips that I suggest here: keep your backgrounds light. So I'll normally do light shades of gray, blue even. Sometimes like I showed before with the team space, I did have a dark teal background because I was trying to emphasize create more of a contrast feel. Just be careful with that. I've seen a lot of people, especially in Lucidspark, create really bright frames and then they put color on top of that, and it's a lot. You're gonna want to shoot for balance. And so sometimes it's just easier, just like don't overthink it. Keep the background lighter, light shade of gray, white, and then splash color within the shapes, within the components that you actually have in the frame would be my suggestion. Lines for the frames. So good balance there. If you have a lot going on, so like we have a lot of colors that are popping out in this presentation. So I decided just to make the frames, that outline of them, black. If I was doing different colors, it might be a little bit too much. So that's a way that you can kind of maintain balance. I always think about what's the focal point or what are the things that I really want to catch people's attention. I don't care about adding color to the frame if I have a lot of color within it. So just a thought there. If it's absolutely necessary, you can add text to the beginning of a flow to say, hey, start here, end here, if you're ever concerned about that flow, or you can connect it with lines. Okay, so refining. I'm going to zoom in here while we talk about some of this stuff. Okay, this is that refinement process. Again, we're still working within making this design more functional. The key here is we want to reduce friction and communicate ideas clearly. So you're taking your draft, you have all of these ideas or these shapes laid out with all the steps you need. What is on those shapes? So oftentimes I'll come in at this stage and there will just be lines and lines of text within a shape. And I'm like, whoa, this is a little too much. At this point, you want to start removing some of that noise and trying to be a little bit more concise with the text. Another important thing is to align the text. So if you look at this visual here, we went center alignment on all of these. If there's variation here, it might move our eyes all over the place. So it just feels really nice, cohesive. You have some repetition there in terms of what we've decided to do with the text and with alignment there. Proximity pair ideas. So it's pretty natural in a flow chart to do this, just because, especially if you have swim lanes, they're naturally paired up. But you can see the spacing here of this is all happening within a certain time frame, and you can see that within the proximity. Using white space. So this is actually a big part of being able to establish proximity. One of the biggest things that people struggle with when they first get into design is they're worried about all this white space, all this negative space. They feel like they need to fill it. I don't know what the impulse is, but a lot of people have it. White space is actually really good. It gives the text, it gives the things that you really want to highlight space to breathe. If it's crowded, if you do not have white space in between, the different shapes and from text to shape to the edges, it's gonna feel really tight. And as someone who struggles with being claustrophobic, my team laughs at this, but every time I'm like, let the text breathe. I can't breathe looking at this. So just giving some space there. You also create some white space in between the text when you're adding spacing between the different lines, which you can do easily in Lucidchart. And actually, anytime that you're working with text, I would recommend switching over to Lucidchart, just because you have a lot more features there that are going to be supportive of that. And we go over that in the course. Matching the size of objects that are similar and the same. So making sure that all of these right here, it's going to look a little bit wonky if you have them, different sizes. So it just feels nicer when they are about the same size. And then repetition for consistency. So what you
Tori,
can
do you
do.
mind quickly just zooming in on that content marketing workflow, just to let us kind of take everything that you just said and absorb
You
as it
see
in?
it?
Yeah. And maybe just zoom on a couple sections too, like some of the swim lanes, so we can see some of the ways that I get to organize. Yeah, like the color, variation, the contrast, all of this stuff that Tori just mentioned. You can kind of take everything that she just said and see how it got applied onto this specific process workflow.
One thing to call out here, we're not the color yet. We'll be jumping into that next,
Yes.
but using color here as a way to, pair those ideas and create, relationships there. So the
Mhm.
content manager is in charge of these things, for example. You also can use it where maybe an individual on your team. I might assign Morgan the color, blue, for example. And so everything on the diagram that's blue, Morgan knows like, oh, that's my job, right? Just because we do a little bit of everything. So helpful there. We also have this within the course as well. So you can see a little bit more there.
Amazing.
Okay. To emphasize the things that are important. And you can see a little bit of this here too, again, with the text, how we have certain ones that are bold and also adding color to and consistency with it from frame to frame of how we have the titles laid out. But emphasizing, I said this earlier, white space is actually surprisingly going to help you with that. It's isolating the things that you really need to focus on and pay attention to. This is a big one for me. Keep it to 1 or 2 fonts. If you work at an organization, typically they'll have a brand book, and they actually have specific fonts that you are that you should be leaning on. If you go over 2 fonts, though, especially if you don't know how to balance it, it can get really overwhelming and chaotic. So I know for me, I typically keep it to, I actually try to keep it just to 1, and then I create emphasis by either increasing the font text or the text size, or actually making the text that I want to emphasize bold. So that's my usual go-to, but you can also do that with different types of typeface. And then I already mentioned use bold to increase or bolder increase the font size for headers, size elements, and location on the page. So this one, it's actually good to show it maybe in this team space. So when I was building this, I thought about what are the things that are not going to change the people involved are not going to change, but also our goal and the content to support getting that goal are not going to change. And I want to make sure that everyone knows, hey, this is where we're aiming for. So this is a focal point. Again, we read left to right. So I'm putting the most important things, like this is the stuff you need to be successful and communicate and do the work that you need to. These are your people that you need to connect with. And this is where we're headed. I'm thinking about that. So placement on the page also matters with that. And then make the action that you need clear. So we already talked about that in the layout. Sometimes it's easier to put a panel with instructions and what it is that you specifically need for your team. Something to help with simplifying the text. You don't always need to give all the context front and center. I like to use notes in particular with that. So I'll have a couple of visuals, and then if I have to add context of like, hey, you need to be thinking about this for the video process, or these are the questions you need to ask, I'll just put that in a note and people can access that at their leisure. Okay, I'll actually shout out this tip. All of this is in the course, so don't worry, you're not missing anything here. Or you can access it in that course. One thing to communicate here is your lines, little details that you have in your diagrams actually have a personality. So a curved line is a little bit more playful and it's a little bit more organic. If you want something that's a little bit more solid and structured, more of that solid, what do you call it, Amy? What do we call like the cornered lines? As a sharp corner. Basically what you see in this.
A pointy line? A strict line.
A strict. I actually do not have a title for it. But
a 90-degree and elbow line. I'm loving
elbow. Okay, we'll say that.
Team
so the elbow lines.
Yeah, team effort from the group.
Love. Okay, cool. All right, Amy, I think it's time to bring on some of the good stuff.
Oh, I agree. We have just spent a lot of time on function, but as we've mentioned previously, making a document functional is extremely important. But that doesn't mean we don't add flair, because that is incorporated in good design. However, there are a lot of ways that you can make a visual dynamic, but it truly is all about that balance, right, between that function and that flair. So Tori, take it away and talk to us about some good ways to add flair into a documentation.
Yeah, let's start with color. So everyone loves this, but we really could spend a week on color alone. I have spent years trying to master color and I'm still not a master, but here's some good starter things to get you situated. Color. So there's so many benefits of it, but it's important to think about balancing it. You don't want to overdo it here. So benefits of it triggers an emotional response. So I have here a couple of colors and what the emotional response is usually in relation to that. And when we talk about balance, one thing that jumps to mind is I've been in some documents before where red was one of the colors at the business it was one of their main colors. So this diagram had red everywhere. And what's interesting about it is when red is used, for kind of just like that pop of color, it really does like give it strength. If it's overdone, I almost felt like it was aggressive, like it was shouting at me, which seems weird to give it a personality, but these colors really do have that power. And so being really judicious about the colors that you choose. And you might not have some flexibility with that because your business might have some strict guidelines for what colors you can use, but really important to think about that in terms of balancing it. You can communicate without words. So we kind of showed that with the different process maps, being able to communicate, hey, this phase of the process is done by this person and it's matched with this color. Adds emphasis to information and visual cues. And of course, it creates delight and fun. Okay, so some color rules. Again, like the font, there's some restrictions here. I would recommend try to keep it to 3 colors or less, especially as you're learning how to manage this. A good practice for me when I was learning this is I like a pop of color and then I'll do a bunch of neutrals to support it. As I got a little bit more adventurous, then, as I got a little bit more practice with it, I felt like I could manage the colors a little bit better. But if you ever are overwhelmed, because there's still some times where I'm like, I don't want to think about this color palette. I just need something that looks really nice and operates well. Having that pop of color just to give that contrast with a bunch of different shades that are a little bit neutral is really safe. Follow the 60-30-10 rule. So your business might have brand colors that they follow. And essentially what this is, the 60 is the dominant color that your business supports. Secondary is going to be the 30, and the 10 is the accent. So if the accent color is red, you do not want to be covering your diagram and your whiteboard 60% of the way with that red if it's the accent. So again, like having that balance. Prioritize accessibility and be careful with text. So this is a prime example. This is so hard on the eyes. Like it has, it's funny. I'm seeing it, but my ears are ringing. Like it really infiltrates the senses. Like I don't know how
My
else to
heart,
explain it.
my
Right.
heart hurts. My heart hurts looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't mean that these colors can't work, but it brings us to this last point of saturation of colors hold different weights. And it's important to think about that. So you might be able to make a color combo like this work if you tone down one of the pieces or the saturation of one of them, maybe even both of them, honestly. So the problem here is that it's just not accessible. And with the type being what it having like this bright red with this bright blue, it's just too much. So to be honest, I keep away from colored font for the most part. But then this is how it's done really well. And this is also illustrating, again, how different colors hold different weights. So again, if you are trying to emphasize different elements of your board, or you're wanting to create really solid movement through the board or your diagram, keep in mind that the minute someone opens that diagram or that board, they're going to go straight to the heaviest color that you have. And if that's in the middle, they're actually missing, what's all to the left of it. It's like, oh, I've created this really thorough, movement where I put it all up to the left. You read left to right, it should work. But no, like if you use a color that is really heavy in the center, that's where your eye is going to go. So really being careful with how you place that and being aware of those weights is good. Okay. These formulas are my favorite. So as you're getting into designing, gaining confidence here, this is a really good set of formulas to follow if you're ever in doubt. So complementary colors, these are going to be the colors that are across the way from each other in a color wheel. And they feel really good and give you a little bit of a wow when it's done really well, but you have to be careful with saturation. You can notice here, for example, if this was bright red and this was bright green, it would give you Christmas feelings, right? Holiday, has that kind of attachment to it. So these saturations are brought down a little bit, so it's a little bit more muted, and it works really well for this. Monochromatic and analogous. These are my go-to ones if I ever don't want to spend time on a color palette. If I'm not trying to get really fancy and, really edgy with my colors, I go to monochromatic and analogous. And the cool thing about these, if you actually go to update a color on a shape, our palette, Lucid's color library, is actually organized in that way. So you have monochromatic working here, horizontally, and then vertically you have the analogous. So it's pretty simple for you right there. It's already built out. Okay, so color hacks, color tips. We go into this in the course, and so I'm not going to show you all the ins and outs of this, but one of my favorite things to do is actually create my own color palette. So I'll bring in a picture from somewhere, and actually they have color palettes. If you were just to Google color palettes with complementary colors, you're going to get a lot of visuals that actually have those in there. So color palettes are made. You can just bring that in here, and you just use a color dropper to add to your document. So what I'll typically do here is I put 4 squares next to the image, or 3 squares, sorry, I can't count today. 3 squares next to the image. I'll click on it, and then I go over here to the colors, and then I'll add, and then I'll hit the eyedropper, and then I'll go to the image itself, and I'll click, this is the color I want. And then it will fill in right here in the shape. And so I essentially am just making my own color palette that I then can go back to. I love doing this. Is chef's kiss, love it. Another way that you can make it a little bit more dynamic is if, and you might have noticed this already, I like to use boxes with color for the titles, or you can even layer text over a shape. One thing to call out here is that when you drag them out, sometimes you might need to rearrange them. I show you how to do that in the course, so don't stress there. But I really like having that layering for the text over the color. Make sure when you do this that the color isn't aggressive. Otherwise, it will distract from the text that's overlaying it. And the text is what's most important. This color is just more of the accent. So think about that balance. And the last thing, I tell my team this all the time. There's a book that's called Steal Like an Artist. If you haven't heard of it, haven't read it, I highly recommend it. But essentially the idea here is that we pull inspiration from different places. Amy, do you actually remember this? One of our favorite things that we built together was actually inspired by a skincare ad that I saw.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So the information was just laid out in a really creative, great way. And the intention behind it is exactly what we needed for the project. And so really look around you, look at menus, look at, different websites. A few of these I have listed here, and those are also a part of the course. But I go in there and I, take what I like, leave what I don't, and don't feel shame in that. Still like an artist. It's great. I do it all the time.
I'm dropping it into the chat, you all, so you guys can see what document we ended up making based off of the skincare ad.
Okay, great. So we're going to wrap this up quickly. Again, this is all in the course. So if you ever want to get into the weeds and all of the details of the features, you can do that there. But images and icons. So the benefits are that it creates delight and fun. It accelerates understanding, and it really does help with your memory. It helps you memorize these things or recall it better. The things that you need to avoid. Using icons as decorations or illustrations. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this where it's like, oh, we're just gonna make this like, its own thing here. The icons are designed to be a certain size for a reason. And I'll admit, when I first started, I was doing a lot of that. So it was a learning for me. So just make sure you understand that, they're intended to be a certain size for a reason. Using mismatched icons. So this is mismatching. This doesn't feel like a family. They don't feel like they're related. These do. So think about if you choose to go with a set of icons, make sure that they feel similar. Using the same icons through a design. So what I mean by that is if I'm trying to communicate collaboration as an idea, and I have two hands shaking as an icon, but I'm using that for other parts of the training that I'm giving where I'm talking about clarity, it creates confusion. You're not tying that icon to the actual collaboration message, right? And so you ideally would want to stay consistent with, okay, we have this icon for collaboration. This is connected to that. And then clarity has its own icon. And then that's kind of the visual indicator, the repetition that you're going to establish through the rest of the design. And then don't overuse GIFs, don't overuse images. The images and GIFs should be supportive. Add fun to it, add a little bit of flair. But if you're adding too much of it, if you're trying to fill that white space, it's not going to be good. It's just going to be distracting. It won't enhance your messaging. Okay, we go over this in the course, but I'll shout out a couple of my favorite things. As I've made these different titles and made different shapes to incorporate in other designs, I've made my own shape library. So in Lucidchart, you can make shape libraries. I've actually made my own design shape libraries. So I'll grab components from Lucid or some elements that I use often, like our logos being an example. And then other color palettes that are acceptable for Lucid. Yeah, I'll just put that into a shape library and I pull on those every day. So that is chef's kiss, love it. Using opacity over pictures. So if I pull this opacity shape away, you can see this is a very vibrant photo. Okay, this is going to distract. It's not going to enhance. So putting an overlay that, with the opacity adjusted is going to make it a little bit more subtle, right? And then it actually will allow you to be able to put text over it. So making it a little bit more dynamic there. Okay, and then I like adding drop shadows, not only to buttons to designate like, oh, this, has an action attached to it. I can, press this button and go to the sub process I linked in this other page. But I also like to add it to images too. It just gives it a little bit more of a polished look rather than being flat. It's kind of more popping out at you from the canvas. So I like to add those to the images as well. So wrapping this all up, if you take nothing else away from this webinar, from the course that we are linking and sending out to you, from the guide, all the resources we're sending, the biggest thing is remember, good design is crap. Okay, remember this acronym because it really will anchor your designs and make it more functional. Amy, you want to bring us home?
Woo, Tori, so many good things, so many good nuggets were just provided. Thank you so much for taking the time, reviewing everything. The chat was blowing up, the Q&A was blowing up,
Oh,
which
wow.
reminds me, there are two final things before we cover some final questions to you, Tori, that we've highlighted that we definitely want to talk about out loud. But the two reminders are, first and foremost, the recording of this session, as well as that fabulous course myself and Tori have been mentioning throughout this entire presentation, are going to be coming to you all via the email you used to register for this webinar within about 1 to 2 days. So you should see that either tomorrow or probably Monday. So just keep an eye out in your email. Again, that email that you used to register for this webinar for the recording, as well as that fabulous course. Now, want to jump in to the Q&A, but before we do, one kind of final quick plug here is you guys might have noticed and accessed this invite to this fabulous webinar via the Lucid community. The Lucid community is a wonderful place to continue to ask questions like the ones you have been asking today to get inspiration from other users. I'm going to call out Chris, who has been on this call. Chris, you have been dropping some fabulous additional nuggets around images and colors and icons and different libraries to utilize. So if you want to continue to have this type of a conversation and to lean on each other, steal like an artist, as many of us have been chatting about in the chat functionality, utilize that Lucid community to keep this conversation going and to continue to dive in. But Tori, we do have a couple questions we'd love to point in your direction to
Yes.
get some of your thoughts on. So I'm going to jump into the Q&A and I'll
Actually,
kind of review some. Or is there one that you've already highlighted you want to answer?
well, Kira looks like she's answering it. There was actually one that I thought you might be best positioned to answer, Amy, from Philip. Slide 12 and others, if you scroll down to the bottom, showcases use of notes to add additional information while keeping visuals uncluttered, which is great when viewers have access to Lucid, but they don't export to other formats for non-Lucid viewers. What is the recommended workaround, or is Lucid working on an update that will allow notes to export in some way?
That is a really great question. So one of the workarounds that is just dependent on your type of an account, so I do want to caveat with this, is the ability to utilize one of our sharing features called Publish Link. Tori, do you want to quickly, just as I'm talking about it, show where and what Publish Link is? In the drop-down menu, you would either find in
Oh.
Lucidspark in the little hamburger menu, or if you're in Lucidchart, you would find this under the share drop-down menu. Either one of these. If you go into that hamburger menu, Tori, do you mind following along with me real quick?
Yeah, it's in here. Oh, I'm pausing. I am so sorry.
No, you
You're
are
like,
so good.
are
So
you
yeah,
listening to me?
I
Yes.
was like, wait.
Sorry. I was
So
paused. There you
you
go.
are so good. If you create this type of a link, this creates a published view link that creates a view only version that individuals can access, but does not require them to have a license in Lucid. It gives them that view. So if there are notes, if there are fabulous features that you've utilized, like layers, different things like that, they'll be able to interact with those without having to have a license. But again, they're only getting a view only version. In regards to if you do not have access to this type of a feature, unfortunately, the only way to work around this is to have that text visible, meaning if you are exporting this as a JPEG, a PNG, a PDF, whatever that might be, the current best practice is to have the text visible in some way so that it can, because dynamic features like that, where things are layered or hidden, if you will, need to be visible to pull onto a flattened image like a PDF or a JPEG or a PNG.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. That was great. I was like, I know that you are a pro at this. Okay. So question that just popped up, can contrast cause reader fatigue? That's what my gut is saying. Like, is there too much contrast? Then there's actually no contrast. Okay. Listen to your gut. Okay. There definitely is such thing as contrast fatigue. And really that's what it comes down to in terms of when you're balancing, really getting down to the bone as far as, hey, this is what needs to really be highlighted here. And if you're ever in doubt, honestly, then pull back on it a little bit. I think the fatigue comes more from color, using color as contrast rather than, some of those elements I discussed earlier of increasing font size and bold, all of that. So that's what I've come to find. But you are spot on. It can create fatigue, especially in the color realm. So you want to be careful with that. Are there any particular rules to repetition you suggest? Example, rule of 3. It's actually a really good question. Anytime that I'm overwhelmed, I guess actually rule of 3 is really great. So when I think about slide decks, for example, the things that I will think of is the text needs to be the same throughout it, right? So you want to see a pattern of I'm doing the same thing with the headers. The text and the body is going to be the same from slide to slide. So make sure that there's repetition in what you're doing with the text, and then visual components and color. So I guess essentially like that is where my mind goes, making sure that there is a true pattern with the color. Don't try to get all wild with it. I think about this facilitation webinar, for example. We had repetition where the starter slide looked the same throughout it, and it gave you that indication that we are starting on this new topic that we want to cover. And we made sure that these slides all operate the same. You have that same panel right there, but we changed the color to fit what we felt was necessary to designate that particular topic. So you're seeing repetition there too. So I'd say the biggest things are making sure that the text is the same throughout it. What you essentially decide to emphasize is consistent. So making sure that the titles are all bold in those areas. And then especially if you're doing several frames, making sure that there's cohesion there as well.
Awesome. Tori, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone. I know we are at time, a little bit over time. Thank you to all who are able to come and to join this webinar. It has been fabulous. It's been so interactive, which is just life for me and Tori. As you might have noticed,
Yes,
we're slightly passionate about this, just like a little bit, not too much. I just want to thank you all so much. Again, keep an eye out for that email. It will have the recording. It will have all of these fabulous materials Tori and her team have made moving forward. And thank you for joining today. Keep an eye out for future marketing webinars through the Lucid community, as well as other social media platforms, because there are more fabulous things to come.
Thanks. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us. We'll catch you all later.